right, so while we're waiting for that, there we go. There we go. I have a couple of hard acts to follow, my colleague and then a researcher doing super interesting work, which is always difficult. So I am David Armano. My title is Senior Cx Strategist. Cx stands for Customer Experience, for those of you who aren't familiar with the jargon of that term. Have been in digital since, too long. I don't want to give away my age, but you can probably figure it out. One of the things I wanted to do is talk about what I call BM, and not the BM that you might be thinking about, before metaverse, a life before metaverse. And so obviously at events like this, and it feels like in the past year or so, metaverse has become something of a mainstream phenomenon. And what it's got me thinking about is the past as we move forward, because some things just stay true regardless. So I love this visual that I was able to find. Interesting enough, it's in a book titled Empathy in Action, which is part of the theme of this talk. It's how do we deliver more empathetic experiences to the customer, to the user, just to people. And what I like about this visual is, in addition to it being educational, where it talks about how we got our basics needs covered in early humanity, being hunters and then farmers and then the industrial revolutions, what's really key about this visual is if you look at that curve and you look at the time periods, and that we are now in this, what a lot of people talk about as this fifth industrial revolution. It's sort of the second half of the digital revolution that started really 20 plus years ago. And that curve is steep for a reason, because it's happening in much less time. Whereas those first revolutions spanned hundreds of years, we are now undergoing digital revolutions that happen in really decades, in much less time. And we have to now adapt to the changes that are happening, and that's really profound. So as we move into this world that is referred to as Web3, which metaverse is a part of, which AR, VR, XR, whatever we want to call the combination of these things are a part of, it's really worth keeping in mind that this is happening really fast. And in truth, in reality, we're still recovering from Web 2.0. It's like a big web hangover that we haven't fully gotten over. And I don't know about you, but I just mastered my email inbox, and now I have Slack. I have Slack and email, and I still have to figure out how my mind and body and everything, and I'm productive, as I'm sure all of us are, but I find myself having to come up with ways to manage these things. And I know I'm not alone. So that's maybe an enterprise customer where I am the end user of all these new technologies that have come out, and I still have to get things done. Companies have made huge advancements and apps that make our lives easier, but they also create all other kinds of issues. So we created this amazing world after the first part of the internet with Web 2.0. All the things that we can do, we can schedule dates with a swipe, we can get pretty much anything on demand, but we're still really adjusting to those things that were just really created less than a decade ago, really, if you think about it. And if there's any single example of really where the societal impact has been made, it's the combination of social apps, social networks, and mobile. That's been one of the most profound things. And again, there's good and bad that comes with that. We can stay connected with people all around the world. We can have live conversations, interactions. It's now cheaper, it's faster, all these wonderful things that come with that connectivity. But there's a number of things that are also not great as well. The model that all these social apps that were created in the Web 2.0 world that we all use looks like this. And by the way, if you know what this is, anyone who's ever had a substance addiction, it's essentially, this is, swap out that phone and put in a substance, and it's the same thing. You ingest the substance some way, you get an artificial dopamine hit, you feel happy. Probably it's not really a sustainable happiness because it's not a true happiness. Your dopamine levels decrease, you need to pick up the phone again. I hope we can all relate to this because, again, and probably many of us, I know I have developed all kinds of ways to manage this over time. I have two young, well, they're not that young anymore, but I have two boys that have had to grow up with this and had to teach them that, when we'd sit down at dinner, we used to stack our phones so we could have these moments. We talk about things like digital detox. So I bring this up because all of this is part of the digital experience that we have. We have as users, we have as customers, we have as people. And there's amazing things that we get from it, but there's also sort of a dark side as well. So in this fifth industrial revolution, as we are moving away, the first was machination. The second, we learned how to mass produce. Things started to become automated in a machine sense. We all know, we've all lived through the digital revolution. And now as we move into this Web3, where there are virtual worlds, where there is augmented reality, where there's artificial intelligence that's starting to become indiscernible very early on. We're in early on days there, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then there's that opportunity. When we talk about personalization, we talk about systems being so smart that they know what you want before you do, and they're able to serve that up, that idea of personalization. As we're on the precipice of that, we have to really think about some of these things and the responsibilities that come with it. And really, one of the first steps, especially if you're a business, is being customer-centric. And again, this is very key when you're a business because you have some form of customer. So this is how Gartner actually defines being customer-centric. They talk about it as customer experience management, which I really love. And it's a very simple definition. They say customer experience management, or CXM, is the discipline of understanding customers and deploying strategic plans that enable cross-functional efforts and customer-centric culture to improve satisfaction, loyalty, and advocacy. And what I really love about this is, so at the core, you have to be a customer-centric business. You have to really live for your customer. And by the way, being employee-centric, really making sure your employees are taken care of and that there's strong culture goes hand in hand with this. So that is the core. Without that, or with that in place, then you can actually develop what they describe as customer experience management. But what's key from that is that is where the customer is satisfied. That's where they become loyal. And that ultimately creates things like advocacy, which is the best form of marketing and advertising in the world, right? Like when someone tells you, you have to try this, you have to go there, this is amazing, you have to do it, and it's someone that we trust, that's called word of mouth, and that's the best marketing that exists. I'd like to actually use Chick-fil-A as an example of this, primarily because it's a little bit less popular with the circles that I travel in, but one of my younger sons exposed me to Chick-fil-A, to the wonders of Chick-fil-A, and I have to say, they get customer experience, and they also get employee culture as well. Because one of the things that you notice, and now I've become a fan of their breakfast sandwiches. I don't get it that often, but when I do, I will use the app, which is amazing. And it's a great example of those Web 2.0 technologies coming together in a mobile context. It's one of the best app experiences I've ever had. But that digital experience, the things that we're doing really isn't enough. Because if I walked into a Chick-fil-A and they weren't friendly, or the food was bad, or the service wasn't great, it would all fall apart. But they're great at that as well. Their employees are always friendly, always helpful. One time I ordered breakfast, and I actually came in at a time where breakfast wasn't being served, and I screwed up. It was user error. I didn't use the app right, and they fixed it no problem, even though it was past breakfast time. So it's that combined digital, real-world experience that comes together to really make it great. So I actually think that they're one of the companies that gets that. The challenge that any company, any organization, and it's an opportunity as well, and it's relevant to Web 3.0 and the metaverse, is that automation is inevitable. It's been on a trajectory, and it's only going to accelerate. When you go back to that curve, right, and the curve continually gets sharper, we've experienced that mechanical automation. We're starting to see all other kinds of automation. It's actually the business that Soul Machines is in a way. A lot of our customers who do use our digital people, it's a form of automation. We are trying to make it a better form of automation, a more empathetic form of automation. But automation has sucked. in a lot of ways, right? How many of us have had the phone experience, we just want to talk to someone because it doesn't work in a lot of ways. We're tired of pressing the buttons, or the natural language processing hasn't been great. A lot of the same firms, I think, are using that natural language processing that's been around for 50 years, and they haven't updated it. And so the customer experience is pretty terrible when it comes to a lot of automation, but not all automation. And we're at an inflection point. So I'm going to tell you 2 stories about automation and where this could be going, and how that customer experience really has the potential and can migrate to a more empathetic customer experience. So Amazon Fresh, with their grocery stores, it's early days, but they took out the most painful part of the grocery shopping experience, which is the checkout. It wasn't awesome when you had to wait in line and there was a person there, and it's actually not awesome when you have to go and scan it and fight with a machine and figure out how to weigh your fruit and vegetables and do all those things. So the fact that Amazon knows who you are, knows what you buy, knows what you're putting in your cart, and you just walk out is pretty amazing. It's early days, right? But there will be more experiences like this, and automation is at the core of it. Second story I want to tell you, somewhat related to this. Has anyone here, show of hands, used the vending machines that are right in the area where we can get food? Okay, yep, you used one. I got hot pretzel and a smoothie, and they were fully automated, and it was amazing. Everything tasted good. The pretzel wasn't perfectly done, but it was good enough. And I was amazed at how efficient the automation was. And actually, what I thought as I was doing this was well, there was no small talk or anything else, but then I thought, but what if some of that was actually built into the experience so that it wasn't just efficient and the food was good enough, but it had that sort of human-like quality to it? I probably wouldn't mind that if it was the right thing. I had to wait for a few minutes while the pretzel was being warmed up, around 4 to 5 minutes. What if it started up a conversation with me and asked about things that I could do in Santa Clara, if it actually would make recommendations? I wouldn't mind that. Chances are I actually would appreciate that, especially if they were curated. We were trying to figure out restaurant plans for tonight. I would have loved a restaurant recommendation at that very moment. So the opportunity for us as we move towards Web 1.3, as we move towards automation, is more empathy for the customer, not less. What are those experiences? How can we make them more than just transactional? And chatbots, which are now mainstream, they're actually pretty great, but I would say they're great at transactions, right? I've used chatbots to get, just like this use case shows, to get information, maybe to see products, maybe to get a level of customer support that's a little bit debatable, but if I needed to get almost like a FAQ type answer, a chatbot is great. But it is non-empathetic, it's text-based, there's no emotion there, there's no emotion that I get for it, and for the most part, that's okay, it's the right tool for the job. But what if we could add empathy to those kinds of experiences? So when we talk about something that we call empathetic customer experience, or ECX. And really it's built on these 3 pillars, which is how our minds operate when we have empathy, especially if you have high EQ. It first starts with that cognitive empathy, just the ability to intellectually understand someone's situation, where they're coming from, and be able to process that. And by the way, some people aren't really great at that. Some people are really good at that, but that's the gateway, that's the first step. The second is emotional empathy. It's not just, I think, I can process what you're telling me, but I actually feel what you're feeling. I can reflect the feelings that you have. And that third is compassionate. Well, now that I know what your situation is and I can feel and relate to it, I want to help you, and I will do it with empathy, right? I'm not going to actually help you with something in a cold way or an instructional way. I'm going to do it in a way that takes your situation into account. Again, with all the great things that we use on our phones and apps, you don't really get these 3 pillars. You get from point A to B, and that can be really great. That can actually elicit an emotional reaction, but the way that you go about doing it is not emotional in and of itself, and it doesn't really express empathy. So what could that look like in the real world? So our digital people, it's early days. We do have deployments in the real world. What I'm going to show you is almost a 50-50 combo. I would say about 50% of what you see can be deployed today, and the other 50% is a little bit vision of the future. But think about when you've ever been at your most vulnerable. This person just had knee surgery. Whenever you are sick, if you've had COVID, I've had COVID, it was pretty bad, you feel really vulnerable. You're actually at your most vulnerable. So what can an experience look like? An automated experience, and that's the key, because the perfect experience would actually be a really empathetic doctor who would talk to you at that moment. That's the perfect. Nothing will replace that. But if the experience does need to be automated, how can it be better? How can it be more empathetic? So I'm going to go ahead and show you.
Hello, this is Sol, Dr. Beanie's assistant.
Hello, Sol. This is Tyler. I wanted to ask you about my recent surgery.
Hey Tyler, I see that you had a total knee replacement 5 days ago with Dr. Beanie. I have access to your records and can help you with any questions you may have.
Thank you, Sol. First, I don't remember what they found at surgery. I was a little out of it.
No worries, I just read your operative report and reviewed the visual records from the operating room. You had exposed bone on both sides of the joint and a torn meniscus. These are both considered excellent indications for surgery, so you can expect very good resolution of your symptoms.
That's great. The live XR was kind of cool. So, I'm glad it was correct. Also, the drone delivery with my medications arrived just as I got home, but I can't remember which pills to take or when. Can you tell me?
Yes, of course. The discharge summary states that you should take the pain medicine about 20 minutes before you put on your headset for your virtual reality meditation therapy.
And my leg, it's a little swollen as well. Should I be concerned?
First, let's run a thermal scan.
You have my permission.
Thank you. Voice print activation enabled. According to the scan, the skin surface temperature and tensile grade is not suggestive of any complication of a clot in your leg.
Okay, well that's super helpful, Sol. I feel much better.
Yes, I can see and hear that. Your anxiety measures dropped 7 points.
That's so cool how you can just see that. What else did you find?
You were a little behind on your knee flexion goals compared to other people your age and gender at this time in their recovery. You only achieved 100 degrees of knee flexion and are not putting enough weight on your operated leg.
Well, what do you think I should do about that?
I will send your results to Dr. Beanie's office, as you might benefit from in-person physical therapy. I can arrange an automated insurance approval for the treatment.
Okay, well that makes sense. You have my permission. In the meantime, what should I do for exercise?
Voice print activation enabled. I sent the referral request and it was approved. We can review the exercises you should be doing, and, if you can put on your rehab sensor shoes, I can help verbally guide your exercises.
Well, I like the idea, Sol, but can we do it a little later?
Of course, I'll reach out at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning.
You're kidding me, right? I'm supposed to be resting, remember?
Okay, fine. How does 9 o'clock sound?
That's much better.
Great. I scanned your home and see that you have a connected coffee maker. I'll set coffee to brew at 8:45.
Well, thank you.
All right, so that coffee thing at the end, that's really far out there, but who knows, maybe one day. So what's unique about our digital people is they can do the things that are listed here. They actually can, in that interface that he was just using on his laptop today, what does work is that the digital person can see you through a camera. They can see if you smile, they can see if you frown. They will actually respond to things like smiles and frowns. So it's early days. Those are the two easiest things to detect, but we'll get to the importance of those kinds of emotions. There's actually 4 main components to how our digital people operate. One is autonomous animation, another form of things going autonomous. So what that means is our digital people actually have essentially a digital brain, and the animation is happening in real time. It is not done in advance. The second is that digital brain that's able to actually do things like process what it's seeing, process smiles, frowns, animate, do the autonomous animation. We have a digital DNA studio that allows users to actually customize digital people, change skin tone, hair color, eye shape, things of that nature. And then the last part, which is actually really important and would have been evident even in that video, is the conversation design. I like to think of conversation design as basically what user experience design was 15 years ago. It's very early days. It's what's used in chatbots. For us, it's a sort of 2.0 because we feel we bake in a lot more empathy in it, but it's actually putting the guardrails in a conversation so that the interaction with the user really just makes sense. So this is how the Digital DNA Studio looks and operates, and these are all the customizations that you can do. The applications that we have, so obviously things like customer support. We've done use cases that include employee training, where we actually are using digital people to help train employees. So they're actually being someone who might call in. We have these really cool controls where we can make a digital person seem anxious and worried. And so the person being trained needs to respond to that. Healthcare, as you've seen, financial, actually our largest client, or one of our largest clients is FIS, which actually powers a lot of financial engines. Things like research, there's really a number of different use cases where we can do these. And we're beginning to talk about this idea of return on empathy. So if customer experiences can be and should be more empathetic, how do you measure that? You can measure that, and we're in the early stages of that, but it's really exciting. So I came from an industry in the past 10 plus years where we started measuring sentiment on social media. So the things that would be said on a social network on Twitter, you could look at the taxonomy, you could look at the words, you could discern, is this combination of words positive, negative, are those people angry? And it's the same type of data that we'll be able to discern from facial expressions and audio. So audio sentiment, the volume, the tone, visual, smiles, frowns. Once that becomes more involved, so we can start seeing at this point in the interaction, there were 20 smiles and 2 frowns at that interaction if you were a customer experience. That's data that we can pass on to the organization that wants to know more about their company, or customer rather. So it can help us with things like, is this person actually willing to buy? Would they say something good about us? If there were 30 frowns in an interaction, probably not. If there were more smiles than frowns, probably so. So this is pretty exciting because it's very early days where we can actually get this type of data and make some sense out of it. So in summary, as we build Web3 and things like the metaverse, the things that we want to do is make sure that at the end of the day, we're designing for humans. Think about that dopamine loop and how long people spend on whether it's a headset or a phone or a virtual or augmented environment. We have to be thinking about the effects that have on people. We want to put our customers at the center, think about their needs, think about their emotional states. That's what empathy is. Lead with empathy and ethics. We're developing more policy about the digital people and how they should be used. If they're not used appropriately, we will pull that. Automate with care. It's inevitable. There just will be more automated experiences. Jobs will shift. Those experiences don't have to be cold and they don't have to be transactional. They can actually feel more human and they can be more than just useful. And enable both conversations and transactions. That's really one of our goals, and that's what we do with conversation design. And that's what you saw in that video as well. There was some interactions that happened there, but it felt like a conversation. It wasn't someone actually going through a visual interface and just checking a few boxes. It was a conversation with someone who was someone other than your doctor and who wasn't a real person, but it still was conversation-like in many ways. Thank you. I think we ran out of time, so.
Well, we have time for a question or two if they're really short. If you have a question, please go into the floor mics or to me and we'll pass you a mic so it can get recorded. I don't see any questions, so thank you very much,
Okay,
David.
thank you.